Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Agustina Lorensa. I'm from class 8 student Pasar. Number ID 211117105 and 6. Now I want to tell you about relative clause. A relative clause is a clause that modifies a noun or noun phrase and uses some grammatical device to indicate that one of the arguments in the relative clause refers to the noun or noun phrase. For example, in the sentence, a man who was too sure of himself. The subordinative clause, who was too sure of himself, is a relative clause since it modifies the noun man and uses the pronoun who to indicate that the same man is referred to in the subordinative clause, or in this case as its subject. Relative clauses are introduced by a special class of pronoun called relative pronouns, such as who in the example just given. In other language, relative clauses may be marked in the different ways. They may be introduced by a special class of conjunction called relative verbs. The main verb of the relative clause may appear in a special morphological variant, or a relative clause may be indicated by word order alone. In some language, more than one of these mechanisms may be possible. Okay, types. The first, bound and free. A bound relative clause, the type most often considered, qualifies an explicit element, or usually a noun or noun phrase, appearing in the main clause and refers back to the element by means of some explicit or implicit device within the relative clause. The relative clause may also function as a embedded clause within a main or higher level clause, thereby forming a matrix sentence. The noun in the main clause that the relative clause modifies is called the head noun or particular. For example, in an English sentence, the person whom I saw yesterday went home. The relative clause whom I saw yesterday modifies the head noun person, and the relative pronoun whom refers back to the referent of that noun. The sentence I equivalent to the following two sentences. I saw a person yesterday. The person went some. The third argument need not fulfill the same rule in both clauses. In this example, the same person is referred to by the subject of the matrix clause, but the direct object of the relative clause. A free relative clause. A free relative clause, or used relative on the other hand, does not have an explicit intended external to itself. Instead, the relative clause itself takes the place of an argument in a matrix clause. For example, in the English sentence, I like what I see. The clause what I see is a free relative clause because it has no attendant but itself serves as the object of the verb like in the main clause. Alternative, one could argue that the free relative clause has a zero as its antecedent. Okay, next, restrictive and non-restrictive. One relative clause may or may not be restrictive. A restrictive relative clause is a relative clause that functions as a restrictive modifier. A non-restrictive relative clause is a relative clause that is not a restrictive relative clause, whereas a non-restrictive or non-defining relative clause merely provide supplementary information. A restrictive or defining relative clause modifies the meaning of its head word, restrict its possible referent. For example, the person who lives in this house has not been seen for days. This contains the restrict relative clause who live in this house, which modifies the meaning of person and essential to the sentence. If this clause were omitted, it would no longer but now which person is being referred to, and the remaining part will not really make sense. And the mayor who lives in this house has not been seen for days. This contains a non-restrictive relative clause since this provides supplementary information about the mayor but is not essential to the sentence. If this clause were omitted, it would still be known which mayor is meant, and the remaining part would in speaking, it is natural to make slight pause around non-restrictive clauses, and in English this is shown in writing by commas or is an example. However, many language distinguish the two types of relative clause in this way only in speaking, not in writing. Another difference in English is the only restrictive relative clauses may be introduced with that or use the zero relative pronoun, or see English relative clause for a non-restrictive relative clause may have a whole sentence as its antecedent rather than a specific noun phrase. For example, the cat was a lot on the bed, which annoyed the dog, and her, which refers not to the bed or the cat, but to the entire proposition expressed in the main clause, namely the citation of the cat being allowed on the bed. Finite and non-finite. Relative clauses may be entire finite clause, or as in the example above, or non-infinite clauses. An example of a non-finite relative clause in English is the infinitive clause on whom to rely in the sentence, she is the person on whom to rely. Permission methods. Language differ in many ways and how relative clauses are expressed. The first, how to the rule of the third noun phrase is indicated in the embed clause. How the two clauses are joined together, where the embed clause is placed relative to the head noun, or in the process indicating which noun phrase in the main clause is modified. For example, the English sentence, the person that I saw yesterday went home, can be described as follows. The rule of the said noun in the embed clause is indicated by giving, that is, a give is left in the object position after saw, implying that the shared noun phrase, or the person, is to be understood to fill the gap and to serve as the object of the verb so. The clauses are joined by the complement desired that. Then bed clause is placed after the head noun person. Gap with relative clause. In this strategy, there is simple a gap in the relative clause where the shared noun would go. This is normal in English, for example, and also in Chinese and Japanese. This is the most common type of relative clause, especially in verb, final language with prenominal relative clause, but is also widespread among language with past nominal as externally headed relative clause. There may or may not be any marker used to join the relative and main clauses, or language with a case marked relative pronoun are technically not considered to employ the gapping strategy even though they do in fact have a gap. Since the case of the relative pronoun indicates the rule of the third noun, often the form of the verb is different from that in main clause and is to some degree nominal. Relative pronoun type. This is a type of given relative clause, but is distinguished by the fact that rule of the said noun in the embed clause is indicated by the case marking of the marker, or the relative pronoun used to join the main and embed clauses. A language which use relative pronoun have them in clause initial position. Thus one could confidently imagine a clause final relative pronoun analog go to an adverbial subordinator in the position they are unknown. Some languages have what are described as relative pronoun, in that they agree with some properties of the head noun, such as number and gender, but which do not actually indicate the case rule of the said noun in the embed clause. Non-reduction type. In the non-reduction type, unlike the other second, the said noun occurs as a full fledged noun phrase. In this, the embed clause, which has the form of a full independent clause. Typically, it is the head noun in the main clause that is reduced or missing. Some language relative clause of this type with the normal strategy of embedding the relative clause next to the head noun. These languages are said to have internally headed relative clause, which will be similar to the English structure. You see the girl over there is my friend, or look, you see the girl over there out on a date. This use, for example, which use a special relative verb, or as with some other Native American language. A second strategy is the correlative clause strategy used by Hindi on other Indo-Aryan language as well as Bambara. This strategy is equivalent to saying, which girl you see over there? She is my doctor, or which knife I call my friend with the police found that knife. It's correlative because of the corresponding which, that, demonstrative or which. She, he, read pronouns, which indicate the respective nouns being equated. The same noun can either be repeated entirely in the main clause or reduced pronoun. There is no need to front the said noun is in such a sentence. For example, in the second example above, Hindi will actually say something equivalent to I call my friend with which knife. The police found the knife. Okay, the next, the defining clauses. A defining or indefinite clauses tell us which tell us sorry tell us which specific person or thing we are talking about in larger group of people or things. If a defining relative clause is removed, the meaning of the sentence changes significantly. A defining relative clause is not separated from the rest of the sentence by or parents. For example, the woman who visited me in the hospital was very kind. The second, the umbrella that I bought last week is already broken. The third, the man who stole my big bag has been arrested. And the fourth, the weather that we had this summer was beautiful. Non-defining clauses. A non-defining or non-essential clause give us more information about the person or thing we are talking about. If a non-defining relative clause is removed from a sentence, we also some detail, but the overall meaning of the sentence remains the same. Non-defining relative clauses are always set up from the rest of the sentence with comes or parents. For example, the farmer whose name was Fred sold us 10 pounds of potatoes. Elephants, which are the largest land mammals, live in the herd 10 or more adults. The other who graduated from the same university I did gave a wonderful presentation. Okay, I think that's all for me about relative clause. Thank you and see you.